Personal log, stardate 99243.15. Instant Soundout of the Starbase Hero Club. I ask myself as I begin this journey, will it be worth it to review and look at every single Playmates Toys Star Trek release, regardless of if I own it? Or will this be a giant disaster? I guess we'll just have to find out as we boldly go into the first video. Hello, this is Soundout here, and welcome to the Star Trek Playmates Toys Retrospective Part 1. This is going to be a series chronicling every release in the Playmates Toys Star Trek line, from the beginning in 1992 all the way to the bitter end in 1999. We'll also touch upon 2000 and 2009 just for a little spice. But let's not focus on that. Let's start on the beginnings and the origins of this line. For this was a long-running toy line that Playmates Toys had much success with and is fondly remembered by collectors, especially as we look forward to 2022 when Playmates Toys returns to the brand. Now, I personally was very excited about that, and that is why we've launched this series into warp speed. And I promise I'll try to keep puns to a minimum, but yeah, we'll see what actually happens. So let's talk about Star Trek in 1992 before we talk about the toys. The Next Generation was widely popular in its 5th season, running strong. It had finally broken its chains. Storytelling got broader, more introspective. People had interpersonal conflict. It was great. And, of course, at this time, Paramount Studios was starting to expand the Star Trek roster. They were thinking about spin-offs, which eventually became Deep Space Nine. Movies, such as Generations, was in pre-production. And they were starting to ramp things up significantly, especially since Star Trek just crossed the 25-year mark. So, in that line, Playmates Toys, who was riding super high off their Ninja Turtle success, was ready to take on another license. And what's interesting is about the time that Turtles starts to wind down, Star Trek starts to wind up. So, in that regard, the two were meeting at a perfect spot. Next Generation, which was initially met with fan backlash because it was a new Star Trek series, it's inevitable, was beloved by the time Season 5 came around. The original series movies had concluded at this point, and we're starting to move into a new era, and one sadly without Gene Roddenberry. So going into this new era, we need a new toy license. What do I mean by new? Well, the line initially started for Next Generation with Galoob. They produced a small series of figures that weren't too successful during I think around the first or second season of the show. And those had not as much appeal, I think, as Star Trek's Playmates line, because that is the line that I think most people think of when they think of Star Trek toy line. So because of this, we kind of set the stage. Playmates was coming from a place of coming into the brand, being the second team to start with the Next Generation, but having a completely different approach where they weren't just focusing on basic figures, but trying to take action figures to a new level. And so as we chronicle throughout this, we're going to be covering the first year, 10 figures and a couple little extras, the first series of the Next Generation.
Computer subspace transmission to Starfleet Command from Enterprise. Stardate 45481.4. It's a single blast, source unknown. Lieutenant Worf checks weapon systems. Captain Picard orders full shields from Lieutenant LaForge in engineering. Suddenly there is an alien presence on the ship. It's one of the Borg, a hostile robotic life form. Commander Riker returns phaser fire.
Star Trek, the Next Generation action figures from Playmates.
Before we kick off Series 1 of Next Generation, couple disclaimers. First of all, I don't own every single figure in the line. I'm sorry. It just wasn't financially possible to do so, with a lot of them being incredibly rare, and most of them, though, are character variants. I own every unique character that was released in the line, at least for the 4.5-inch scale. The other thing, I don't own every accessory, and I'm not going to focus on them too heavily. So you'll see accessories used with figures, may not be the colors they came with, but they came with those accessories if you see them holding them. And thanks to the awesome website Wixaban, who gave me permission to use images from their website, we will have at least carded shots of every single figure so you can kind of give an idea of what they came with. If you want to see more details about the line, I do recommend checking it out. That is probably one of the coolest websites and was the most helpful in getting information for this video. There'll be a link for it down in the description below. So let's begin. Alright, so Series 1 of the Next Generation were packaged on a beautifully vibrant card back. I really love the way the Series 1 packaging looks. Just a ton of colors. This was 1992, but it looks like the 80s hadn't died yet. Or maybe that explosion is the 80s dying and just splashing color all over the cards. Toy packaging isn't this nice anymore, and I really do love seeing this, and I hope that, you know, the line keeps it going. Spoiler alert, doesn't quite, but I do love how just bright and vibrant this is. And it was pretty nice in other countries too. I did actually find images for Canada, Germany, and Europe, where in Germany and Europe they were distributed by Bandai. I can't escape that company on this channel. They're following me. Help. Now before we talk about the figures themselves, let's go over some basics, mainly the articulation. As you see on screen, neck, shoulders, elbows, biceps, waist, hips that work in a weird direction, and the knees. They all have this articulation unless I otherwise show it. I may not say it, but if you see something I'm showing, there's a restriction. Also, every figure came with an action base. Most of them are the comm badge from Next Generation. If it's different, I'll show that as well. Kicking the line off right is Captain Jean-Luc Picard, here appearing in his Season 5 Captain's Jacket look. Great look, great looking figure, one I don't own. And despite the fact my parents collected this line heavily for years, I can't seem to find a copy of this figure in our home. Next up, Data. Now Data, of course, is a classic TNG character, and this figure is very good. He has a nice body sculpt where he's not too much of an action pose, though his hands are molded a little weird, which we'll talk about in a moment. The likeness, pretty dang solid. I do think that Playmates did a good job with likenesses for the most part for this line, especially considering this is the early 90s. Most figures didn't look this accurate to the TV shows or movies they're based on. Also adding into that, he does have opening panels in his arm and on his back, which is a neat little detail that I really appreciate. Him holding his accessories is weird because he has to have special handles because again they didn't mold the hands for the accessories. And he does have the standard, what will be standard tricorder holster. But yeah, that phaser, it looks like a lightsaber. And I hate to say that, but it does. Next up, Worf, also in his Season 3 appearance. And I do love this line, but there is some weird figures. Worf just looks bizarre. His likeness, fairly solid, but his pose, strange. His accessories, he can't even hold properly. The batleth looks weird, the other dagger looks weird, the sword thing he comes with looks weird. He has like an open hand and then a closed fist with a slight opening that doesn't seem to hold anything. I don't really get it. This is where I think the action pose needed to die. And for the most part it did after Series 1 until the late 90s, which we'll get to at a different time. You know how you can sum up the entire action pose, action figure idea that they went with here? Riker. Dude's got battle damage. I don't know why a Star Trek figure needs battle damage, especially when it's the first Riker figure. I would have liked a neutral one first, and then yeah, you could do some battle damage and go nuts. Next up, Geordi LaForge. Now this is a popular character, and this is a very nice figure. I gotta say, I like that he's in a more neutral stance. Even if he's got super wide hips, he's in a more neutral kind of figure, which fits the engineer of the Enterprise. Also in the Season 3 costume, the LeVar Burton likeness is pretty good. And I might just be saying that because part of his face is covered by the visor, but it's honestly pretty solid. Speaking of the visor, early versions of this figure had it removable, whereas later versions glued into place because child safety laws said, wait, how small is that accessory? And Playmates had to cave. His accessories are pretty on point, pretty much everything you would expect for an engineer to have, except that dilithium crystal. I don't know why it looks so weird. I don't know what, is that raw dilithium? Like, what is it, and why does it come in 9 different colors with 40 different figures? It may be popping up a lot, or I may forget to include it, but yeah, that dilithium part gets around. Lieutenant Commander Deanna Troi, the first of many Troys in the line, and it is one of the hardest ones to get initially. I can confirm this with my dad specifically, who was collecting the line, said that Deanna in this jumpsuit was hard to get, and I found out later that was because she was packed only in the second assortment of Series 1, not the first, so there were less of her out there. Nowadays, she's a lot more common. The figure did get a lot of repacks and reprints, but overall, I mean, it's a fairly decent likeness. I think it's a little heavy on the makeup, makeup, and her accessories are sometimes strange, like her tricorder is a little too big, but honestly, it's a decent Deanna, and it's one of her more common looks. She swapped between this one and the red suit probably every other minute. I did watch an episode the other day where she literally walked out of a room and came back in a different jumpsuit. I don't know how she did that quick change, but hey, that's the magic of Deanna. Next up, Romulan. Just Romulan. This is one of the weird figures in the line that was just species name, but yeah, it doesn't really match anything I could find from the series itself. I think it's supposed to sort of be based on T-Bok from earlier in Next Gen, and it's kind of based on the later Romulan costumes around the time Sela starts popping up. So, weird amalgamation, doesn't really match anything. The card back shows T-Bok, but yeah, I don't know. This is one of those weird ones. It's one of the figures I bought last, because it's not really a character, it's just a Romulan. But unlike a Borg, you kind of feel like he should have a name. Next up, Ferengi. Also just a Ferengi. Based on early Next Generation episode look, weirdly posed figure. He is not anywhere near normal. I can barely get him to stand without his action base, and he doesn't match any of the Ferengi figures we'll later get in Deep Space Nine. Doesn't match the characterization in Deep Space Nine. Thank you, Deep Space Nine, for making the Ferengi kind of cool and interesting. Here, though, yeah, he's just really large. I don't get this figure. In a turn of pace, Gowron the Klingon, like specifically a Klingon. And Gowron was a frequent guest star on The Next Generation, appearing many times, and I'm really glad he got a figure this early on the line. That being said, he does have Series 1 plagued problems, including a elbow without a wrist swivel, so he has a kind of weird uppercut sort of arm to hold a blaster. And overall, he does have a decent likeness, but his costume is not 100% accurate. I'm just glad to have him though. He's pretty nice. Yeah, it's kind of one of those weird figures when you look back on it, but hey, we got Gowron in Wave 1. Before Dr. Crusher, wait, what the heck? And the last figure of Wave 1, the Borg. Just a Borg, not specifically any Borg. I tried to find some source images, but he's just a Borg. And honestly, pretty cool. Swappable arms, different tubes that you can plug in different places. You can actually make a few different distinctive Borgs. I think the only thing would have been swappable heads, but that wasn't really a thing in 1992. So honestly, really like this figure. And yeah, I kind of have a whole like collection of these. Whenever I come across one of these Borg figures at a convention or a comic shop or something, I'll usually pick it up. I do love this figure, and I do have a nice little Borg army. So here's the whole series together, minus Picard and Riker. And I gotta say, pretty nice start overall. You have most of the main cast, except for Dr. Crusher, Playmates. Where's Dr. Crusher? She better be like the first figure of Series 2, because this is an insult. Our first ship in the line is the shuttlecraft Goddard, the most iconic, most appearing shuttlecraft in Next Gen. Wait, what's that, you're saying? It was only in 2 episodes? Yes it was. That being said, it is a super fun toy. I've reviewed this one before on my channel, but I thought we'd revisit it here. Very nicely detailed, very accurate overall, and honestly, I think it's really cool. The fact it rolls is really neat. I think it's a neat, shuttlecraft rolling, kind of gives it simulated flying, and you can actually fit a figure in the front pretty comfortably, even if they have these weird V hips that just kind of move out. The figures do sit down nicely, which is appreciated. And you could technically fit 2 figures in the back if you pull out the little sciencey thing, but as you can see, it's incredibly cramped. I think it needed more space. It needed to be like an inch taller, because the battery pack is kind of blocking all the room back there. But without any figures in the back, it does look a lot better. And like I said, battery pack, it does have sound effects. Now, the next ship is not scaled to work with the action figures. It is the Starship Enterprise, or the USS Enterprise D, if you want to get technical. This is the first release in Star Trek's long-range ship series. It has sound effects. It did not come with a stand like later versions would, but it is a nice, big ship size and really fun. I wish I collect the ships more, because honestly, while researching for these videos, I found these things are really cool. I wish I had more ships, but alas, I only have a couple. From really cool to really weird, we have the communicator walkie-talkie. This is essentially a walkie-talkie which has a detached microphone that looks like a gigantic comm badge. Our next roleplay item would be the phaser, and this I actually did review before, so I'll run some old footage. Essentially, it's got a stun setting and a kill setting, makes sounds, it lights up. It's neat. If you want to see more on that, I did a video where I reviewed several phasers in a row. And the next roleplay item is one I do own, the personal communicator, which I bought at a comic shop for pretty much dirt cheap and then decided to not open it, I guess, because until now I had not cracked this open. But now that I have, the box does make some promises. I don't know if it delivers, but hey, it attaches to your shirt with a weird clip system, or you could just put it in the pocket that existed on a lot of 90s t-shirts. If you're wanting a comm badge, there's a nice Bluetooth one out there, or you can get something from Fansets or Quantum Mechanics. Not recommending this one for reasons.
Now, the box promises communicator sounds, as well as actual lights and sounds from the Star Trek TV show. And even on the top says, authentic Star Trek communicator sound. And I've never heard what this sounds like. So, what does it sound like when we push the button? That's the farthest thing from authentic I can think of when it comes to the communicator badge sound from Next Generation.
The last roleplay item is the Next Generation tricorder. I always liked the tricorder design from Next Gen. This is something I'd probably pick up at some point. But really cool. Lights and sounds and stuff. So 1992 was a pretty good start to the line. 10 figures, which got us most of the crew, minus Dr. Crusher, and we got the main ship and some extra accessories. So some fun stuff overall for fans of Star Trek to have, and a good initial rollout. However, it clearly was successful because we roll into 1993. Next Generation was still going strong, but starting to wind down as Season 6 began airing, as well as the first part of Season 7, which would be its final season, and Deep Space Nine started with airing its entire first season in 1993, as well as the first half of its second season. So, where was Playmates gonna go? Well, they tripled the amount of figures they put out. In year 1, they put out 10 figures, which we just covered. In year 2, they put out 30. So that's a bit of a jump, and honestly, it's why I kind of combined 92 and 93, slapped them together, and called them Part 1, because it all balances out compared to what we'll get later on. So, Series 2 of the Next Generation is up next. This is 23 figures, released in multiple assortments, and honestly, I couldn't find like an exact guide as to which waves they were in. So if you see some variation in the card backs, that's probably why. And there's also variation as to, oh, did it come out with a trading card? Did it come out with a space cap? Did it have a space cap and a pamphlet, and a trading card and a pamphlet? There's all kinds of weird variations with this line, and I think you'll start to notice that. So I'm going to try my best to document it without droning on of like, look, this has got this variation here, and if you went to Germany, it's purple, and if you went to England, it's silver. Yeah, we're not going to get too specific, but I do want to have at least a sort of broad overview so you have an idea. And naturally, we're going to continue forward. So let's get rolling onto Series 2 of the Next Generation.
Stardate 45484.7. While exploring a planet near the neutral zone, the Enterprise shuttlecraft comes under disruptor cannon fire from a Romulan warbird. The shuttlecraft fires back with its phasers, which are deflected by the Romulan shields. Suddenly, the Enterprise appears, firing her photon torpedoes. Outgunned, the Romulan warbird activates its cloaking device and is gone. Under impulse power, Enterprise maneuvers out of orbit before engaging warp drive. Star Trek: The Next Generation. New action accessories from Playmates.
Alright, let's kick off the confusing history of Next Generation Series 2 with the packaging. This is a series that had 23 figures in it, so it's shipped in multiple waves, though I get conflicting reports of when and where, but I decided since they all shipped in 93, let's just review them all in 93. Let's just take a look at one big batch, but there were, 3 different packaging variants. The first batch, which included trading cards, the second batch also included trading cards, and the third batch, which was a reissue in 94 that included space caps. You might be wondering, what's a trading card if you didn't live in the 90s or the early 2000s. A trading card is a piece of cardboard with a picture on it, and on the back sometimes there'll be text. You collect them, and then you can trade them with friends. What's a space cap? It's a POG. Yeah, it says it's another game and lists like 40 different figures that could come with them, but it's a POG. And if you don't know what a POG is,
use Google. Starting off Wave 2, Dr. Beverly Crusher. She should have been in Wave 1. She is a main cast member, but maybe she wasn't included because she was a quote-unquote girl in the action figure line. I don't understand, but whatever, she's here. I'm really, really happy. Now, this is one of the few figures that came with 5 different accessory colors, so good luck collectors that want to have everything. And honestly, I really like this figure. She's got her lab coat, she looks nice, she's got a decent likeness, even if her hair restricts her movement. I'm just glad to have Dr. Beverly Crusher. She should have been in Wave 1. Next figure in the wave, Guinan. Now, Guinan is a guest star that appeared so often, she's basically a main cast member, but was always listed as special guest star, and Whoopi Goldberg played her beautifully. I love this character, and I love this figure. While she does not have leg articulation like you would expect, it doesn't really matter. She is an advisor, a mentor, and also the hostess at 10 Forward, and I really love this figure, and it's probably my favorite of the Guinans, but there are more Guinans to come. Next up, Cadet Wesley Crusher. Overall, pretty nice looking figure. He's in his uniform when he is a Starfleet Academy cadet after he left as a series regular and became a guest star, but he looks nothing like Will Wheaton. This figure just has, I don't know, the hair's not even right, completely off. It's like one of the only misfires of a mainstay character in the line, which is unfortunate because I don't think they ever really got a good Wesley figure out there. But alas, he does at least come with cool accessories, and he does still have the tricolor holster, so he matches up with the Series 1 figures, while admittedly taking a different stylistic approach. He's more of a standard looking Starfleet figure. Next up is Lore. I like Lore. It's nice that they gave Data kind of an extended family later in the series, and Lore, being the evil twin that has all kinds of emotions and personality, is really fun. And I'm glad he got a figure, even if this is not his most iconic look. I think it's like his first look, and it's also not molded correctly because the flap is on the opposite side. I double checked, and yeah, it doesn't seem 100% accurate. I don't know why it's inverted, unless all the images I found were inverted. So, alas, that's how it is. But overall, I'm glad to have Lore. Next up is Locutus of Borg. When Captain Picard was kidnapped and turned into a Borg, it was a shocking moment of television, and Best of Both Worlds is still one of the greatest two-parters in television history. What's interesting about this figure is it is a Best of Both Worlds Part 2 Locutus, when he got a little bit more Borgified and upgraded, whereas the trading card he came with had the version 1 look, which is interesting. But I do really like this figure. I love these swappable hand parts, and I do like the way he looks with the other Borg. It makes a nice little display. Klingon Warrior Worf is a weird figure. He's packaged with an overcoat, which doesn't match his overcoat from Emissary from Season 2, and yet he also doesn't look correct when you take the coat off to match Redemption. Is not quite there. I'm not exactly sure what references they really pulled for this. It seems a little all over the place. At least he pairs up with Gowron nicely. So next up is Geordi LaForge in a dress uniform. That's all I got. Starting off a trio of original series characters is Ambassador Spock from Unification. And Unification, I love that episode quite a bit, so it's nice to have a figure specifically from it. That being said, I don't know what's up with this likeness. It looks like someone sculpted Spock, just not Leonard Nimoy as Spock in Unification. His hair color's off, his face is off, and his scale's off, plus his accessories. There's a lot of accessories that I don't understand why he has them, but hey, stuff. Next up, we have Admiral McCoy. Now, he only appeared in one scene of Encounter at Farpoint, the TNG pilot, but it's nice he got a figure. It represents the legacy of Star Trek. And yeah, that's pretty much it. He didn't really need to use any of the accessories he came with. He was in one scene with Data. Next up, Captain Scott. Now, he does work well as a original series movie figure as well as being a TNG figure because of the similar costume, but he is based on the episode Relics, where Scotty came to town, basically. But this is a pretty accurate figure overall. I think it's probably the best likeness of the 3 returning veterans. Yeah, he makes a great figure. His accessories make sense, and hey, remember that shuttlecraft Goddard? That was the one that Scotty left on at the end of Relics. So, there you go. Next up, Commander Sela, the second and last Romulan to be released in the line. While there's other figures of quote-unquote Romulans, this is the last true, well, half Romulan. The last one to consider themselves a Romulan in the line. And honestly, fairly solid figure overall. Sela is a complicated character with a complicated history, but I'm glad that Denise Crosby got to come back and be a recurring character because she deserved it. Mordok the Benzite. Funny story, I thought I had this figure, but I went to look for him to do the video, and I could not find him anywhere at all. He is so common, though, that I think I've seen him so many times that I thought I owned him. Does that make him a bad figure? Not really. He's got a good likeness. He is the Starfleet cadet from Benzar that we know from the series, and overall, pretty decent figure. Just didn't know I didn't have him.
him. He was one I had to rush ship off eBay, which was tricky. I basically just found somebody that would be like, can we get it there in a week? And that's how this all came together. Q. Q is a figure that could take many forms, but they decided to slap him in a Starfleet uniform first. And hey, that happened a lot on the show, right? There's other Qs we'll get, but this one is kind of weird that this is their first Q, but hey, he's a nice addition and he's on a new body mold when he could have just reused Picard or something. He also comes with a tiny ship of the Enterprise. Why? I have no idea. It's just fun. Next up is Kaylor. Kaylor means a lot to Worf, and she meant a lot to a lot of fans, and people were kind of upset with what happened to her. But I gotta say, at least she did get an action figure, and I do really appreciate it, even if it's in the weird training gear-ish. It's another amalgamation. I don't know what's up with Klingons not having the correct costumes on the figures, but it happens frequently. She also has a tendency to look upward. I don't know why. Kira at Bashi. Uzani, his arms with fists open. Sokath, his eyes uncovered. Darmok and Jalad at Tanagra. Shaka, when the walls fell. Next up is the Vorgon from Captain's Holiday. Now this is an episode that is well known fairly, has the first appearance I think of the planet Ryza, which becomes an ongoing gag-ish. But the Vorgon itself is something I don't think I really was asking for a figure of, but hey, it's painted nice. It's painted real nice. And it's got cool accessories. I don't have much else. Here we go. A Jean-Luc Picard. Now this one is based on his Season 1 uniform, so this is an all-new figure, I think minus the head sculpt. And hey, it's a pretty good, accurate Season 1 Picard. As you might notice in the next few figures, they're going throwbacks to Season 1. This is my Picard on the shelf for all intents and purposes because, hey, I think this is probably the best one they made. Speaking of Season 1 uniforms, here is Data in his Season 1 uniform. This is a new torso, but mostly the same figure, and it's just to change the collar piece. But I don't own it, and I don't really plan on getting it. So now we have Lieutenant Junior Grade Worf from Season 1. Noticeably, he's in the Command Red instead of the Operations Gold, and he does have a newly sculpted torso-ish. He's got a new collar piece, but it does seem the sash was not changed, which it should have been, and of course he should have a new head because he needs to have the old makeup style, but alas, not the case. But that's pretty much all I got. Next up we have Riker, and here's Riker without battle damage on his chest. This is a quote-unquote Season 2 Riker because he does have the beard, even though he has the Season 1 uniform, so it is Season 2, but it's weird that's the only one listed as Season 2. It's honestly pretty good. It's a new torso on the same body, so he looks weird. He is posed funky, he doesn't hold things right, and he still has some of the battle damage left over, just painted over, so just pretend it's not there. Not the best Riker, but sadly it's the Riker for my shelf, because really, it's the only TNG era Riker that is in a Starfleet uniform. Next up, Lieutenant Junior Grade Geordi. Same thing with Worf, it's mostly a repaint of the Series 1 figure. This one has a new torso for the new collar, and this one also only came with glued in place visor, not removable visor like Series 1. And I also am missing the tricortal holster on this figure for some reason, but yeah, that's all there is to it. Next up, we get Deanna Troi in her maroon jumpsuit. Now, this and the lavender one, she interchanged between a lot, sometimes even in the same episode. Even if it was the same script day, she would change jumpsuits. So it's nice to have both. I do gotta say that I think they took some notes on the Series 1 figure because the makeup is reduced a lot on the Series 2 version. So the red jumpsuit Deanna has less makeup on her face, which makes her, overall, I think, a better looking figure. And lastly, we have a Borg. Just like with Series 1, we ended with a Borg. This one, we end with a Borg. Mostly the same mold, now with the body in some brighter silvers, but he has 2 new replacement arms, which is really cool. And mixing these with the other Borgs from previous, as well as mixing in the different tube options, nice variety of Borgs we got here. Taking a look at the whole series together, except we're going to do it in chunks. First up, the Starfleet officers. Wow, there is so much red here, you'd think it was a Power Rangers toy line. I mean, it also was 1993, so that does track, but yeah, Crusher is the only one not wearing red, and that's mostly because we did Season 1 versions for this series, and yeah, everybody got red. This is crazy. But I do gotta say, it is nice to have all the characters out again, and now including Crusher, and now including Wesley, and also including Q. Really just looks out of place here. Here are our guest characters that appeared more than once. Next up, character variants of less iconic looks for the characters. Here's an assorted set of aliens. And then last up, I want to share a group shot of the main cast of The Next Generation, including Wesley and Guinan, but specifically, let's get everybody in here. These are all the main, recurring, and series regular characters for The Next Generation, and they make a nice set. Honestly, it's pretty cool. let's talk about a thing I wish I had. The Star Trek Next Generation Bridge playset. Absolutely incredible stuff here. This is a playset that's essentially an oval, but it has every corner of the Enterprise D bridge. Wish I owned it. It goes for a lot of money. It is very hard to get complete. It had electronics in it even. This is a crowning achievement. I wish there were more of these for other bridges, but I love this, and if I ever get the chance to purchase a complete one, I will totally take it, even though I have no idea where I'd put it. Now, something I do own is the transporter. I've owned this for a very long time, so I apologize that it's like super beat up, but I've had it since I was a kid. This is a fun toy. It's nicely detailed to look like the transporter room-ish, not exactly, and it does load one figure inside, and then once you have that figure inside and turn it on, you can transport the figure, beating it up and beaming it down. First ship of the year is the Gold Enterprise, also known as the 7th Anniversary Special Collector's Edition Starship Enterprise. This is just a gold version of the previous Enterprise D release. The Starship Enterprise glider is a glider shaped like the Enterprise. You know, it's funny, we only got 2 Romulan action figures, but we did get a Romulan warbird. I actually own this, but I can't find it, which I apologize for, but it flies around, lights up, makes sounds. And since we have 3 Klingon figures, why not a Klingon attack cruiser? And I actually own this one. So pretty nicely detailed overall, really large size, and pretty fun. It's like large, but not too large. It makes me want more of these Playmates Star Trek ships, and I wish they weren't so expensive. Plus it has some sounds. And last little thing, a collector's case. Holds 12 figures. So following up Series 3, Playmates actually released a special 7-pack box set of the original series Star Trek crew. And honestly, this is really cool. It's the original 7, what we associate as the original 7 crew members, which, you know, Chekhov didn't show up till season 2, and Nurse Chapel isn't included even though she was in all 3 seasons, and, you know, it's semantics. But what we associate as the original 7, which eventually become the 7 who lead the 6 movies that followed the original series, it's really nice to get them all in one shot. It's actually kind of an unprecedented move because this is the only way you can get all these figures. Instead of it being sort of a bundle of figures that were previously released at retail, this is a box set where you get the original crew all at once. The unfortunate part is it being limited to 150,000 pieces means it's not super rare. There's definitely rarer things in the line, but it's not quite as common as the main series, which I can understand for a lot of collectors could be difficult. For example, for me, I spent years looking for this. This was not something that we had, and it was something that I needed to get at some point. Ended up getting everything loose, so I didn't get the cool box it comes in. But honestly, it was really nice to see them just kind of put out the original crew. It was the logical next step because, hey, there is original series fans, and they definitely wanted new stuff, and Playmates tapped into that. And it did launch a whole nother subline of the overall Star Trek Playmates collection. So let's take a deep dive into that and talk a little bit about the fact that there was a bridge playset planned for a few years after that never came to be. So anyways, let's talk about this box set. It's so cool, and it comes in this really great looking box. I've never had this packaging, but it looks really nice. It's got a cardboard captain's chair. It looks like the original bridge. Now, fans were asking for a bridge playset. As late as 1996, there was a prototype floating around at Playmates that was shown at toy fairs and other conventions, and it seemed like they were trying to make it work. According to some sources online, it just was too expensive. It was going to be more expensive than the TNG bridge. At that point, they didn't want to do the investment, and once 1996 came and went, the 30th anniversary marker was missed. At that point, you weren't really going to get too much of a way to market it. So unfortunately, it never came to be, but at least we got this picture of it. Now, every figure in this box set came with the exact same accessories. They all came with a phaser, a communicator, and one of 3 stand types, either a command, science, or operations. First figure, of course, is Captain Kirk. And what impressed me about Playmates here is they could have easily used one mold and put all of the male members of the TOS crew on the same body, but they actually did unique molds for each of them. They not only molded their badges in, which, hey, they were just cloth on the actual costumes, they molded the ranks around the wrists, which I really appreciate. Plus, each figure has a little bit different of a stance. They could have been the same, but they ended up going something different, and that made them really special. Same song, second verse, Spock is also pretty dang good. I think the likeness is much improved over the TNG version, and the scale is improved too. Plus, just to cap it off, he has the Vulcan sign of peace molded onto his right hand. Very nice. Unless you want him to hold things. But otherwise, very nice. Next up, Dr. McCoy. He does have the long sleeve, kind of away team look, not the short sleeve, sickbay look. But I do gotta say, really nice figure overall. I think the likeness is pretty decent. And it actually does scale well with the Admiral McCoy figure we got in Series 2 because, hey, he's hunched over a little bit on that figure. So it all works out. Next up, we got Scotty. Decent likeness. Not the strongest one in the set by any means, but still decent. He does look a little younger, I think, than James Doohan did in the original series. But he does look nice, and he makes a nice companion piece to the Relics version of Scotty from TNG. Next we have Uhura, and Uhura's really nice. I'm really glad they did this figure the way they did because she kind of has a hairstyle that's an amalgamation of a few different hairstyles that Nichelle Nichols wore as Uhura. The only unfortunate part is her skirt gets in the way of her hip articulation, so she wouldn't have been able to sit at a communications station if that playset had been made, so it did kind of work out, but this is a very nice figure regardless. Next up we have Sulu, and Sulu here, he's got a fairly decent likeness, but I gotta say it's not quite there, and it almost looks a little caricature-y. It's not my favorite figure of the set. I think George Takei deserved a little bit better. And lastly, we have Chekhov. And what I noticed when I was looking at the box for this one, Chekhov's first name was given at the time of the original series as Pavel Chekhov, but Hikaru Sulu and Noita Uhura didn't come until much later in the Star Trek time frame. Just food for thought. This TOS box set is a nice culmination of what started in Next Gen Season 2, honoring the legacy of the original series, and it's nice to get their original series looks all at once. Unfortunately, most of these characters did not get these uniforms released later. Some got pilot versions, some got other versions, but I think there's some of these that are only in these looks in this box set. But hopefully, if you're collecting this line, you can find it. This was one of the harder things for me to get, and I did get all the figures loose, which brought the price down significantly, so keep checking around. So that does it for 1993. The line expanded heavily. I've rarely seen toy lines triple in size from one year to the other, but Playmates did it. And I think it was kind of a risk to get away from the action figure sort of styling to a more realistic, more screen-accurate style, but it definitely benefited the line in the future because we didn't see the pre-posed action style until they were trying to kill it years later. But we'll get to that at a different time. Next video is going to be interesting because Deep Space Nine joins the toy line, as well as a new movie, and the wrap-up to Next Generation, leading to a very packed year. So stay tuned for part 2, which will cover 1994 in its entirety, hopefully in the next few weeks, depending on when I get it done. If you enjoyed this, please leave a like. It lets me know that this is the kind of video you'd like to see more of. This series is going to be 6 parts, so be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell to keep up with future uploads. Also be sure to check out the community tab on YouTube here, and check me out on Twitter as I'll be tweeting out when the videos are going up. YouTube's algorithm has not been good at recommending new videos, so if you can do all those things, you'll definitely be able to stay in the loop. Also be sure to leave a comment down below and tell me a fond memory of Playmates Star Trek line, or a favorite figure of yours that you wanted to see, or one that never got made. Just something down below, and we can have a fun little discussion while I work on part 2. And, of course, be sure to check out Hero Club at hero-club.com for your hero and sci-fi news and more, and my awesome graphic designer on Twitter at darkclaw643. And until next time, this is Soundout saying, live long and prosper.